Ezra's flashlight floats, revealing my smoke, fur cat in the mirror, rainwater pools beneath my boots, the red sandstorm outside staining the gaslight orange, bleeding through the grimy windows. I sweep the main hall, the broom's bristles rasping against the worn wood, each stroke releasing the smell of damp rot clinging to my sleeves. Footy not sulfur, I think, the thought sharp and cold. Like the meat left out too long. The drip-squelch of water hitting the puddle echoes the hollow sound in my chest. Tivai drip-squelch. Drip-squelcher. My boot sinks deeper, the wood groaning under my weight, the sound thick and wet. I turn, the flashlight beam cutting through the dust motes. My shadow detaches from my feet. It doesn't lag, it 2 steps forward while my body freezes. My limbs feel like wet clay, heavy and useless. I try to lift my arm to call out, but nothing answers. Only the drip-squelcher from the ceiling, a slow, deliberate rhythm against the silence. The mirror above the old oak desk catches the light. In it, the cat's fur coils like thick smoke, its eyes reflecting only the void where my wife's laughter should be. I see myself in the glass, but wrong. My reflection's eyes are empty, and the cat's smoke fur seems to pulse, pulling the void closer. I strain muscles, screaming with the effort of moving a single finger. Move, just move. The smell intensifies, a cloying stench of something dead and forgotten, seeping into my skin. My breath hitches, a ragged sound in the heavy air. The drip-squelch grows louder, merging with the frantic thud of my heart. Fortin, why isn't it following me? The thought is a child's panic, simple and desperate. Ha, it's not behind me. It's in front, time I force my head to turn slowly, painfully. The shadow stands where I stood, perfectly still, yet it 20 me the shape is right, the posture, but the eyes are the void. It takes a single step, silent, not a whisper of sound, just the absence of it. The wet tweety drip-squelchy from the ceiling seems to stutter, then resume, mocking the silence. My reflection in the mirror, my reflection tilts its head. The void in the cat's eyes flickers, and the reflection's lips curve. A slow, deliberate fweet wink when the shadow doesn't look at me. It looks through me into the mirror, at the smoke fur cat. The cat's fur coils tighter, the smoke swirling, forming a shape within the void. The reflection winks again, a dry final gesture. The wet wintry trelcher of the ceiling water is the only sound left, a slow, relentless heartbeat against the silence of the clinic. The shadow's silent step echoes in the hollow space where my body should be moving, and my reflection winks as the red sandstorm outside bleeds the gaslight deeper into the velvet shadows of the room. The child's room is a tomb of dust and forgotten things. I step over the threshold, the floorboards groaning beneath my boots, the sound like a wet, footy drip-squelchy from the ceiling, though this one is dry and brittle. The air is thick, cloying, and it smells of something I can't name, something that clings to my throat like a hand. I flick the flashlight beam across the room, and it catches the edge of a small, dark shape on the windowsill. A soldier, lead, cold. I reach out, my fingers trembling, and the moment my skin touches it, the cold seeps in like a needle pressing into my bones. The soldier is heavier than it should be. I lift it, and it twist-shifts in my palm, the metal twisting as if it were alive. The flashlight beam catches the soldier's face, blank, expressionless, but the eyes are wrong. They're not eyes. They're voids, hollow and waiting. I try to set it down, but the soldier sinks it into my skin, the lead pressing against my flesh like a second layer of skin. I feel it, the ridge forming beneath my palm, a scar before it even heals. My breath hitches. The room seems to pulse with the rhythm of wet footsteps, though I am standing still. The sandstorm outside howls, a dry, rasping sound like 1,000 voices, whispering in a language I don't understand. The window panes rattle, the glass vibrating with the force of the storm. I press my palm against the ridge, feeling the 40 crackle of dry plaster beneath my fingernail, the sound like a brittle leaf snapping in my hand. The smell of rotting meat deepens, thick and cloying, and I gag. The taste of it coating my tongue. It's not meat. It's something else, something that should not be. The child's bed is empty, but it twinces, the mattress rising and falling like a breath. I step closer, my boots making a wet quelchet on the floor. Though there is no water, the soldier's ridge burns against my skin, and I trace it with my thumb, feeling the crackle of dry plaster under my nail. The room seems to hold its breath. The air is thick, the silence pressing in from all sides. And then from the corner of my eye I hear it, a whisper thin and reedy like the wind through a broken window. It's hungry, Mr. Hall. The voice is a child's, But it is not the child's. It is something else, something that has been waiting. The soldier sinks deeper into my skin, and the whisper lingers, a sound that does not belong in this world. The basement stairs groan beneath my boots, each step a slow descent into the belly of the clinic, the air thick with the scent of rusted hinges and something older, something that tastes like copper on my tongue, sharp and metallic, as if I've bitten into a nail. The radio signal pulls me downward, a crackle of static that 14 unfolds, like a wound, each burst of noise stitching itself into my skull. My fingers brush the peeling wallpaper, the texture like sun-bleached parchment, brittle and ready to flake at the slightest touch. The lead ridge on my palm burns a slow, throbbing heat that doesn't fade, doesn't dull. Just at 10 pulses, in time with the radio's erratic breathing. The signal comes from the far corner, where the light doesn't reach, where the shadows pool like tar. I crouch, my knees pressing into the cold stone, and the cord of the radio twists, at around my ankle, thick, coarse, the texture of a rope woven from frayed wire. It tightens not enough to cut off the blood, but enough to remind me it's there, coiled and waiting. My breath fogs the air in front of me, a ghost of my own making, and I lean closer, the static hissing like steam from a broken kettle. The voice isn't a voice. It's a sound, a choked twin burst of something that isn't quite a scream. Something that twin unravels it in my ears, the frequency too high, too sharp, like the screech of a blade against bone. The mirror on the opposite wall reflects nothing but the back of my own eyes, pupils dilated, black and endless. And then, a shift, a stain spreads across the glass, thick and oily, the color of old bruises forming a jagged shape where the cat should be. Its fur isn't fur. It's smoke, coiled and dense, pressing against the glass like a fingerprint left in grease. The static foin lurches-y, the voice cutting through the noise like a knife like, "Why didn't you fix the window?" Her voice, my wife's, the words slurred, as if she's speaking through water. My hands tremble, the radio slipping in my grip. The lead ridge on my palm sifflesser, a heat that sears through the layers of skin, and I gag, the taste of copper flooding my mouth again, thick and cloying. I slam the radio against the wall. The plastic sieve into splinters, the sound like a skull cracking open, and the static sieve explodes it into silence. 3 fragments lie on the floor, jagged and glinting in the dim light, each one humming with a low, resonant fuven that vibrates through my bones. The mirrors stain twin pulses, the smoke fur writhing, and I don't look away. The air tastes of nothing now, just the absence of copper, the absence of her voice. The lead ridge on my hand burns brighter, a brand I can't wash off, and the fragments of the radio lie silent, waiting for something to turn them back on. The stench hit me first, a wave of putrescence so thick it clung to the back of my throat, tasting like old pennies and despair. I'd been expecting something unpleasant, of course. This whole clinic smelled of neglect and forgotten things. But this was different. It was some dense and layered, like a compost heap left to rot under a summer sun. I'd followed the radio signal deeper into the basement's maw, past the rusted pipes and the crumbling concrete, until I reached a section of wall that felt wrong, hollow. My fingers found the seam, a hairline fracture in the plaster, and with a grunt of effort I pushed. The wall gave way with a groan of protest, revealing a cavity choked with darkness. The smell intensified, a suffocating blanket of decay. I raised the radio, the static a frantic whisper against the heavier sounds of rot. The beam of my lamp cut through the gloom, revealing a pile, a mountain of something meat. Rotting meat. It wasn't neatly arranged. It was heaped, tangled, the color of bruised plums and dried clay. Flies buzzed lazily around it, their wings a faint, irritating foot away. The air shimmered with their heat. I stumbled back, a gag rising in my throat. The lead soldier in my pocket burned, a constant, insistent pressure against my thigh. I forced myself to take a breath, to focus. Protocol. Assess. Document. I pulled a tarp from my bag, a heavy canvas smelling faintly of mildew and disinfectant. It felt flimsy in my hands, inadequate against the overwhelming stench. I draped it over the pile, trying to contain the horror. The canvas was squeezed tight against my face, damp and clammy, and I recoiled, the smell momentarily intensifying. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I swayed, bracing myself against the cold stone wall. The tarp peeled back, drawn by something beneath. A slow, deliberate movement, as if something were tugging at it from below. I stared, frozen, as the canvas fully retracted, revealing more of the putrid mass. And then I saw it. A footprint, pressed into the gore, a clear, unmistakable impression. It was my size, my boots. A child's voice, high and brittle, echoed from the hallway above. "It follows your prints, Mr. Hall. The words weren't shouted. They were delivered with a chilling calmness, a detached observation that amplified the horror tenfold. The lead soldier pulsed, a searing heat radiating through my skin. I looked down at my shadow, expecting to see something. But it wasn't there. The wall behind me was empty, devoid of the familiar darkness. My shadow had vanished. The footprint twin glistened in the lamplight, a dark, oily stain against the decaying flesh. And then, from the corner of the room, a darkness began to free-stretch. It wasn't a shadow, not exactly. It was more. A distortion of the air, a deepening of the gloom, a slow, deliberate Tivan extension of nothingness. It flowed across the floor, reaching, hungry. The chapel door groaned as I pushed it open, the hinges complaining like an old man coughing up rust. The air inside was thick, cloying, less the scent of candle wax and more the clinging damp of a corpse left too long in a sealed casket. My fingers brushed the pew's polished wood, slick with some unnatural sheen, like the surface of a still pond left undisturbed for decades. The lead soldier in my pocket twitched, its weight shifting against my thigh, pressing harder than before. I knelt, the knees of my trousers scraping against the cracked linoleum. The altar loomed ahead, draped in velvet so dark it drank the candlelight, leaving only a bruised black shadow at its edges. The smell here was worse, thick, syrupy. The kind of rot that doesn't just stink but settles in your lungs. I coughed, the sound lost in the chapel's hollow breath. The wind outside howled like a thing alive, rattling the stained glass until it groaned in protest, the red sand outside scraping against the panes like 1,000 fingernails. I didn't pray, not anymore. Instead, I stared at the mirror above the altar, its gilded frame tarnished with something dark, something that hadn't been there yesterday. The glass reflected me back, pale, hollow-eyed, the kind of man who had long since stopped recognizing his own face. My reflection blinked, slow, deliberate. Then it smiled, lips parting to reveal teeth too sharp, too shrun-wrong for a human mouth. I reached out. The glass was cold, unnaturally so, like the skin of a corpse just pulled from an ice cellar. My fingers pressed against it, and the reflection's hand, its other hand closed around mine. The contact sent a jolt up my arm, not pain but something worse. The sudden sickening certainty that I was being swant-held. The reflection's eyes weren't mine, they were deep, too deep. The color of the velvet drapes in the clinic's lobby, rich and suffocating. They held me, watched, waited. A child's voice, small and precise, cut through the silence from the doorway behind me. It's watching you become. I didn't turn, couldn't. My reflection's grip tightened, fingers digging into the glass, and the surface civet ripped along the seams of our joined hands, not with sound, but with a wet, tearing hiss-on, like parchment soaking in ink. The lead soldier pulsed, burning through my trousers, its heat searing my skin. The reflection's mouth moved again, whispering something I couldn't hear. The candle flames flickered, their light twisting into something solid, something 40 alive, a coil of thick, oily smoke, writhing just beyond the mirror's edge. It had no eyes, no face, just the shifting, restless motion of a thing that had no need for breath. The cat. It pressed against the glass, its fur, if it could be called fur, stretching like tar, pulled too slow, too careful. The smell of it hit me then, a wave of something metallic and sour, like copper left to fester in the dark. My reflection's fingers slid free of mine, leaving my hand empty, the glass now marked with a dark, oily print where it had held me. The child stepped closer, pointing at the mirror. See. The voice was too calm, too knowing. It's already done. The reflection winked. And then, it was gone. I stand before the wall, my knuckles already aching from the chapel's cold. The lead soldier burns against my leg like a fever, its heat searing through fabric and skin. It squirms in my pocket, writhing like something alive, fun something, that wants out. My fist slams into the plaster. A wet crunch echoes off the bare walls, a sound not unlike the snapping of dry twigs underfoot in winter's first frost. The impact jars up my arm, and I hiss through clenched teeth as pain explodes behind my eyes. But there is no time for pain. There is only this urge, this need to remove. The plaster shatters, a ragged hole gaping like an open mouth filled with broken teeth. Something dark seeps from within, staining the wallpaper, a deep velvet hue that seems to absorb what little light filters through the sandstorm outside. The smell hits me then, rotting meat, thick and cloying, filling my nostrils until I can taste it at the back of my throat. I press my palm against the velvet. It is soft, too soft, like touching a corpse long left unburied. My fingers sink into its plushness, and there is no resistance, only this sensation of Tivan sinking, like plunging into deep water on a moonless night. I push harder until my hand is buried up to the wrist. Suddenly, it gives way. The velvet tears open with a sound not unlike heavy canvas ripping, the kind of noise that echoes in your chest rather than your ears. A cold wind rushes out from within, carrying with it a scent so foul I gag, retching onto my chin and neck. It smells like sulfur, like the stench left behind by lightning after it is struck. My hand is sucked into the wall, pulled deep into its belly, until only my wrist remains visible, a pale, trembling thing against the dark velvet. Panic surges within me. I claw at the edge of the tear with my free hand, trying to widen it so I can wrench myself loose. But the velvet resists it, clinging to my skin like oil-slick patterns on water. There is a childish giggle from behind, a sound far too cheerful for this place. This moment. It echoes through the hallway, bouncing off walls and floors until they seem alive with laughter. I know that laugh, it belongs to her, the girl in the mirror. The one who watches me becomes something else. I turn, my arms still trapped within the wall's cold embrace. She stands at the far end of the hall, her reflection a shimmering dance against the glass, but she doesn't move, not this time. Instead, it is as if Ifording Chefti is watching for mine. Help me, I whisper, not knowing why or to whom I speak. But there is only silence. And then, the scream silent but echoing within my mind like 1,000 piano notes played at once. The lead soldier screams with no sound, its heat burns through skin and bone until all that remains is this cold, hollow ache in my chest. Then darkness claims me, a velvet blackness that seeps into my eyes, my ears, my mouth filling every cavity, until there is nothing left but the faint echo of a childish giggle. The floorboards are slick with something dark, not water thick, slow-moving oil that clings to my boots as I drag myself forward. The child's feet don't make a sound, not yet. My breath fogs the air in jagged bursts, each exhale a ghost of my own making. She's ahead, bare soles slapping the wood in wet, uneven rhythm fun splat. Splat like she's stomping through a puddle of something thick, something fun wrong. The sound clings to the air, lingers like the stench of burnt copper after a fire. Your shadow eats the light, she says. I freeze. The words hang between us, not a whisper, but something worse, a child's voice shaped like a blade. My shadow isn't on the floor. It isn't behind me at all. It's moving. I turn slow, deliberate, like pulling a bandage off a wound. The hallway stretches long, too long, the walls pressing in like the ribs of some dead thing. The mirror at the end of it isn't just glass anymore. It's a mouth, and it's one breathing. The cat isn't in the mirror, not yet, but my shadow is. It stepped ahead of me, black and too wide, its edges frayed like the hem of a torn cloak. It doesn't walk. It 20 slithers, dragging itself across the floor like a snake shedding its skin. The child giggles, high and bright, and I want to cover my ears but my arms won't listen. The sound bounces off the walls, ricochets through the empty rooms, and for a second, I swear I hear it echoing from the ceiling, from the sidwalls themselves. Your shadow eats the light, she repeats, tilting her head. I lunge. The floorboards groan under my weight, the oil slicking my boots, sending me skidding forward. The child bolts, her feet forward slapping, the wood in frantic rhythm. Splat, splat, splat. Splat, splatty like she's trying to outrun something. I grab for her, my fingers brushing the hem of her dress, but she twists away and I stumble, my knee hitting the floor with a wet tufadu. The mirror at the end of the hall shrivels, not with heat but with something darker, something alufti. The cat is there, not smoke, not fur. Just fortitis, a shape that isn't a shape, a stain on the glass that moves when I don't look. Its eyes are two dark pits and they're swatching. The child doesn't stop running. She doesn't look back. She just void vanishes into the mirror, her feet still slapping the wood even as her body fades. The glass some breathes, see. A wet, tearing sound fills the air, the kind of noise you make when you pull a strip of flesh from bone. The cat's smoke first stained, see. The mirror thick and oily, creeping outward like a slow-moving bruise. The lead soldier in my pocket ficheves, its heat pressing against my chest like a brand. I reach for it, fingers trembling, but it twists away, burrowing deeper into the fabric. Then the shadow moves. It steps out of the mirror behind me, slow and deliberate, like a man unbuttoning his coat. The air turns thick, heavy with the scent of something rotting. Not the meat, not the sulfur, but 20 bone. My shadow stretches toward my shoulder, fingers too long to run wrong, pressing into my collarbone like a cold, wet kiss. I turn. The hallway is empty. The mirror is just a mirror. And the cat is still there, staring, waiting. The candlestick felt cold, heavier than it looked. A dull, grey thing coated in a film of something that crumbled under my fingers. Dust, ash, who knew? I scraped it against the stone wall, a grating screech that echoed down the long hallway. a mockery of the radio's incessant guttural gurgle. It was a futile gesture, a desperate attempt to drown out the noise, the Fivingine inside it. I threw it. The impact was sickeningly satisfying. The ceramic shattered against the far wall, a spray of fragments that glittered in the candlelight orange. One shard, sharp and wicked, embedded itself in the palm of my hand. A brief, sharp sting, then a blossoming warmth, a deep velvet forty ouze that stained the floor. I barely registered the pain. The image of the child, her bare feet slapping the oil-slicked floor, was too vivid. "You left her in the storm," a voice whispered, not from the radio this time, but from everywhere. It clung to the shadows, resonated in the dust motes dancing in the candlelight. I stared at my hand, at the crimson bloom spreading across my skin. The velvet was thick, viscous, and it smelled wrong, not of blood, but of something else, something ancient and decaying. The scent clung to the back of my throat, a metallic tang that coated my tongue. I tried to wipe it away, but the stain only deepened, spreading like a malignant flower. The mirror at the end of the hall remained undisturbed, reflecting only the flickering candlelight and the distorted image of the hallway. The cat wasn't there, not yet, but I felt its presence, a weight on the air, a silent observation. The radio crackled, a burst of static followed by another strangled gurgle. I wanted to smash it, to obliterate the source of the noise, but I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by a dread that seeped into my bones. The candlelight seemed to shrink, the shadows to lengthen, pressing in on me like the walls of a tomb. My shadow shifted, a subtle movement at the periphery of my vision. It wasn't mirroring my stance, it was reaching. A long, distorted tendril extended from my form, probing the air as if searching for something. I clenched my fist, trying to control it, to force it back into alignment. But it was beyond my control. It was separate. It was Sybede other. The voice whispered again, closer this time, a breath against my ear. "You left her in the storm." I wanted to scream, to lash out, to break free from this suffocating nightmare. But the words had taken root, twisting around my heart, constricting my lungs. I felt a tremor run through me, a vibration that started in my fingertips and spread through my entire body. The lead soldier in my pocket grew hot, burning against my thigh. I reached for it, desperate for something solid, something real, but it shifted, burrowing deeper into the fabric of my trousers as if trying to escape. The mirror rippled, not with a reflection of light, but with a distortion of something twin dils, a darkness that seemed to writhe beneath the glass. I didn't see the cat, not yet, but I felt its gaze, cold and calculating, piercing through me. The velvet oozed from the shard wound, a slow, relentless tide of crimson. It dripped onto the oil-slicked floor, mingling with the darkness, creating a pool of something utterly wrong. The radio sputtered, coughed, then fell silent. The silence was worse than the noise. It was a silence pregnant with expectation, a silence that screamed of impending doom. The lead soldier felt cold, a familiar weight against my palm, a childish talisman against a darkness that had become everything. The mirror loomed, a vast obsidian eye reflecting the candlelight in a distorted mockery of warmth. The cat wasn't there, as usual. Only the scent of decay, a cloying sweetness that clung to the back of my throat, and the incessant gurgle from the radio, a mechanical wheeze that seemed to burrow into my skull. I raised my arm, the soldier a tiny, insignificant thing against the vastness of the hallway. It felt heavier than it should. I hurled it. The impact was a shattering bloom of sound, a sulfur crack that resonated through the silence, followed by a cascade of tinkling fragments. The mirror didn't just break, it exploded. A spiderweb of fissures spreading across its surface, the reflection of the hallway dissolving into a chaos of silver shards. The oily smoke of the cat vanished with it, swallowed by the sudden violent rupture. A gust of frigid air rushed from the broken glass, carrying with it a scent of something ancient and wrong, something that tasted like rust and regret. Then it stepped through. Not a reflection, not a ghost, but something twine solid, something that shouldn't have been. The shadow. It wasn't the elongated distortion I'd seen before, mimicking my movements. This was independent. It coalesced from the fractured light, a formless mass that sharpened into the vague outline of a man, tall and gaunt, its features indistinct, swallowed by the perpetual twilight that clung to it. A guttural voice, not quite a whisper, not quite a scream, ripped through the air. "You failed." The words weren't directed at me, but through me, vibrating in my bones, a physical assault. My hand moved without conscious thought, lunging towards the shadow, a desperate attempt to grasp something real. But my fingers passed through it, meeting only a chilling emptiness. a void that seemed to suck the warmth from my hand. The velvet 20 ooze from the shard wound pulsed, a sickening rhythm against the sudden chill. The lead soldier dislodged from my grasp, clattered to the floor, and with a sickening fun click, fused itself directly into my chest. It wasn't a penetration, more like an integration. The metal seemed to melt, becoming one with my flesh, a cold, unyielding core taking root within my sternum. A searing pain bloomed, a silent scream trapped within my throat. The scent of rotting meat intensified, overwhelming the lingering sweetness, a suffocating blanket that pressed down on me. The air thickened, heavy and viscous. From the shadows, tendrils of oily smoke began to coil, not swirling and dissipating as they usually did, but tightening, constricting. They wrapped around my neck, a cold, suffocating embrace, the texture like wet parchment against my skin. I tried to pull away to gasp for air, but the tendrils held fast, their grip tightening with each futile struggle. The radio sputtered, a final strangled gasp before falling silent. The silence that followed was the worst kind to end a pregnant stillness, a vacuum waiting to be filled with something unspeakable. The shadow stepped fully out of the shattered mirror, its form solidifying, taking on a semblance of me, but twisted, corrupted. The eyes were hollow pits, reflecting nothing but the candlelight orange, and a cruel, mocking smile stretched across its face. The child's voice, a distorted echo of my own memory, resonated within my skull. You failed. It was a condemnation, a judgment, a final, damning verdict. The lead soldier pulsed within my chest, a cold, unyielding weight, anchoring me to this nightmare. The red sandstorm hissed against the clinic's leaded glass like 1,000 dry tongues scraping stone. I floated above the worn oak floor, a shape without edges, watching my past self sweep dust from the hallway. The lead soldier pulsed within my chest, a cold, metallic heartbeat against the new hollow where my ribs used to be. It sank deeper now, a slow, deliberate penetration. The scent of coppery rot, no, not sulfur, soul blood filled my nose, thick enough to taste on my tongue. My past self, Ezra, moved with the tired rhythm of a man who'd forgotten how to hope. He didn't look up. He never looked up. The mirror across the hall held the only witness. The cat's fur, always smoke, now stained the glass. Not swirling, not dissipating. It is settled, leaving a dark, viscous smear like ink in water. The third footprint. I watched it form a slow seep into the silvered surface. The sandstorm's hiss deepened, a wet rasp against the window panes. Hiss, hiss, hiss. It followed the rhythm of the soldier's pulse inside me. Thump, 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 The past Ezra paused, his broom hovering. His shoulders hunched, a familiar slump of regret. I saw the moment he dropped the soldier, the moment I'd become the mistake. The mirror showed him turning toward the broken glass where the shadow had stepped through. But I was already here, watching him watch me. When you became the mistake. The child's voice wasn't in my ear. It was in the fort floorboards, vibrating through the soles of my non-existent feet. The words weren't sound, they were the haughty absence of sound, a silence that pressed against my eardrums like cold water. My past self shivered, a tremor that made the broom clatter against the floorboards. Thud, thud, thud. The sound echoed the soldier's pulse. The scent of rot intensified, clinging to the back of my throat, a suffocating blanket. I felt the weight of the past Ezra's grief, the crushing guilt he carried like a stone in his chest. He'd tried to fix it. He'd tried to fix him by someone else. He'd failed. Just like me, the cat's smoke. Fur thickened on the mirror, the stain spreading like a bruise. The third footprint wasn't a print. It was a footy wound, a dark smudge seeping into the glass, pulling the reflection of the past Ezra closer. He turned his eyes wide with a dawning horror I'd felt 100 times before. His mouth moved, forming silent words I'd screamed into the void. Why didn't you come home? The sandstorm hissed louder, a sharp, dry sound like teeth grinding together. Hiss, 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 hiss. It matched the slow, deliberate sinking of the lead soldier deeper into my chest. I felt the cold metal press against the bone, a final, unyielding anchor. The scent of rot turned to the sharp tang of wet parchment tearing, a sound only I could hear. The past Ezra's reflection in the mirror began to shifty. His shoulders straightened. The slump vanished. The eyes that had held such sorrow now held a terrible, empty calm. The reflection was already replacing him. The cat's smoke fur stained the mirror, the third footprint forming a perfect circle around the point where the reflection's hand would rest. The sandstorm's hiss became a single, sustained whisper against the glass. Hiss. The lead soldier sank the final millimeter, embedding itself completely. The scent of rot faded, replaced by the clean, sharp smell of cold metal. The past Ezra lifted his hand, not to sweep, but to touch the mirror. His reflection reached back. The cat's smoke fur left the third footprint, a dark wet mark on the glass. The reflection's hand met his own. The past Ezra smiled. A small, terrible thing. The mirror showed him already becoming the shadow. The sandstorm hissed against the glass, the only sound left in the world. The cat's smoke, fur settled into the third footprint.